For years, her life revolved around taking care of a marriage that quietly erased her. Laundry, routines, silence. One small decision became a turning point: choosing herself. What began as a simple change in what she wore became a reclaiming of confidence, desire, and identity. This is a story about the quiet power of self-respect and how choosing yourself can be the boldest act of all. If this story helps you understand that reclaiming yourself begins with the smallest choices, please like and subscribe. There are marriages that don't end with dramatic betrayals or violent conflicts, but instead die through the slow accumulation of small surrenders, through years of putting someone else's needs and comfort ahead of your own, until you wake up one day and realize you've disappeared completely. That the person you were before the marriage has been erased so thoroughly that you can't remember what she wanted or valued, or even what made her feel alive. For 16 years, I lived in a marriage where I performed the role of devoted wife so completely that I stopped being a person with desires and needs of my own, where every aspect of my life, from how I spent my time to what I wore under my clothes, was organized around my husband's preferences and comfort, while my own identity slowly dissolved. The moment that catalyzed my transformation from selfless servant to someone who prioritized her own needs didn't come through therapy or infidelity or any of the typical marriage-ending events. It came while I was doing laundry, holding my husband's stained underwear that I'd been washing without complaint for 16 years, when I suddenly understood that this small, degrading task was symbol of everything I'd accepted, everything I'd sacrificed, everything I needed to reclaim. That day, I made a decision. I would stop washing his dirty boxers, and I would start buying myself the beautiful lingerie I'd never allowed myself to have. What seemed like trivial change in domestic routine became the beginning of reclaiming my identity, my confidence, my sense of my own worth. My name is Patricia Hayes, and I'm 43 years old. I'd been married to my husband Robert for 16 years when the laundry incident happened that would catalyze my transformation from invisible domestic servant into woman who prioritized her own needs and desires. Robert and I had married when I was 27 and he was 31, both of us ready to settle into the kind of stable, conventional marriage that seemed like natural next step in adult life. Robert worked as a project manager for a construction company, made decent middle-class income that provided comfortable if not luxurious lifestyle. I'd worked as a dental hygienist before our marriage, had enjoyed my career and had been good at my work. But Robert had convinced me to quit after we married, arguing that managing our household full-time would be better use of my time and energy than continuing to work when we didn't financially need my income. Looking back, I can see that decision, me quitting my job at Robert's urging, was the first major surrender of independence and identity, the beginning of transformation from autonomous person into someone whose entire existence was organized around serving her husband's needs and comfort. But at the time, it seemed like reasonable choice, like prioritizing our marriage and our future family over my individual career ambitions. We'd been planning to have children, and staying home seemed like it would make that transition easier when the time came. Except, children never came. After 3 years of trying without success, after extensive fertility testing that revealed I had medical issues making pregnancy unlikely without expensive interventions, Robert decided he didn't want to pursue treatments or adoption. He'd never been enthusiastic about parenthood in the first place, had agreed to try for children more to fulfill expected life script than from genuine desire to be father. When natural pregnancy didn't happen easily, he took it as sign that maybe children weren't meant to be part of our lives, suggested we accept childlessness and focus on building good life as couple. So I stayed home, managing household for just 2 adults, without the children who would have justified my full-time domestic role, without the career I'd abandoned, without any real purpose or identity beyond being Robert's wife and maintaining his comfortable existence. I cooked his meals, cleaned his house, managed his schedule, did his laundry, organized his life in ways that freed him to focus entirely on his work and his hobbies, while I became progressively more invisible, more erased, more reduced to functional role rather than actual person with needs and desires of my own. The pattern that developed over 16 years was that every aspect of my life was organized around Robert's preferences and comfort, while my own needs became completely irrelevant. Robert liked his meals at specific times prepared in specific ways, so my days were structured around his eating schedule, regardless of when I might have preferred to eat. Robert needed quiet environment to relax after work, so I learned to move silently through our house, to not disturb him with conversation or requests for attention, to make myself as unobtrusive as possible. Robert had specific preferences about how household tasks should be done, how clothes should be folded, how kitchens should be organized, what temperature house should be maintained at. And I learned to fulfill these preferences exactly. Learned that any deviation would result in criticism or irritation that was easier to avoid than to endure. Robert's laundry became particularly symbolic of my complete erasure of self in service of his comfort. He was not careful or clean person. His clothes were often stained with sweat and dirt and various substances from his work sites. His underwear especially was frequently soiled in ways that required significant effort to clean properly. For 16 years, I washed Robert's dirty boxers without complaint, scrubbing out stains, treating them with special detergents, hanging them carefully to dry, folding them, and putting them away in his drawer, where he could access them without having to think about the labor that went into maintaining his supply of clean underwear. Meanwhile, my own underwear was utilitarian and practical, purchased cheaply in multi-packs from discount stores, replaced only when they became too worn to function. I never bought myself nice lingerie, never invested in anything beautiful or sensual or designed to make me feel attractive. Partly this was because Robert had made clear through comments and behavior over the years that he didn't care what I wore under my clothes, that my body and my appearance weren't important to him beyond basic maintenance of respectability. Partly it was because I'd internalized the message that I didn't deserve nice things, that investing in myself was selfish when that money could be used for things Robert wanted or needed. Our physical relationship had been dead for years. We'd have sex maybe once every few months, perfunctory encounters that Robert would initiate when biological urges overcame his general disinterest in physical intimacy with me. He'd never comment on what I wore, would sometimes not even fully undress me, would finish quickly and roll away without concern for my pleasure or connection. I'd learned to not expect anything from these encounters, to treat them as obligations to fulfill, rather than as opportunities for genuine intimacy or pleasure. I couldn't identify exactly when I'd stopped being person and had become just function in Robert's life. The cook, the cleaner, the laundry doer, the household manager who made his life comfortable and convenient. It had happened gradually over 16 years of small surrenders, of prioritizing his needs over mine, of accepting his indifference and his lack of interest in me as person, rather than as service provider. I'd forgotten what it felt like to want things for myself, to have preferences or desires that weren't about fulfilling Robert's needs, to imagine that I might deserve attention or investment or care. The breaking point came on a Tuesday afternoon in March while I was doing laundry. I pulled Robert's boxers from the washing machine to hang them to dry, noticed they were particularly stained despite having been through wash cycle, realized I'd need to treat them again and re-wash them to get them actually clean. As I stood there holding my husband's soiled underwear, something inside me just broke. I'd been doing this task, washing his dirty boxers, treating stains, ensuring his comfort, for 16 years without complaint, without acknowledgement, without any recognition that this was labor I was providing, that this was service I was performing, that this was my life reduced to managing his bodily functions and his physical comfort. I looked at those stained boxers and suddenly saw them as symbol of everything I'd accepted, everything I'd surrendered, everything that was wrong with my marriage and my life. I was 43 years old, had no children, no career, no identity beyond being Robert's domestic servant, spent my days performing tasks like washing his dirty underwear while my own needs and desires had been so completely suppressed that I couldn't even remember what they were. And Robert didn't appreciate any of it, didn't thank me for the meals I cooked or the house I cleaned or the laundry I did. He just expected it all as his due, treated me as appliance that performed necessary functions rather than as person who was making choices to serve him. I dropped Robert's boxers back in the washing machine without treating them or re-washing them. I walked out of the laundry room and sat in my living room processing what had just happened inside me. Something had shifted fundamentally. I couldn't continue doing this. Couldn't continue washing his dirty underwear and cooking his meals and organizing my entire existence around his comfort while my own needs remained completely unacknowledged and unfulfilled. I didn't know yet what changes I was going to make or how I was going to reclaim myself from 16 years of erasure. But I knew I wasn't going to wash his boxers anymore. That small task had become symbol of everything I needed to stop accepting. That evening when Robert came home and asked what was for dinner, I told him I hadn't cooked, suggested he order something or make himself a sandwich. His surprise was almost comical. I'd cooked his dinner every night for 16 years without fail, and the sudden absence of that service confused and irritated him. "Why didn't you cook?" he asked, accusation in his tone. "What have you been doing all day if you didn't even have time to make dinner?" "I've decided I'm not going to cook for you anymore," I said, the words feeling powerful and terrifying simultaneously. "Or do your laundry, or organize your schedule, or perform any of the other tasks I've been doing for 16 years without appreciation or acknowledgement. You're an adult, Robert. You can manage your own meals and your own laundry and your own life. I'm done being your servant." Robert's response was immediate anger and incomprehension. "What are you talking about? You're my wife. Taking care of the house and cooking meals is your job. What else are you doing with your time if you're not working?" The response revealed everything about how he saw me and our marriage. I existed to serve his needs, had no value or purpose beyond performing domestic labor that made his life comfortable, deserved no appreciation or recognition, because I was just doing what wives were supposed to do. "I quit my job 16 years ago because you asked me to," I said, anger building in my voice. "You convinced me that managing our household would be better use of my time than continuing my career. But we don't have children. We have a small house that doesn't require full-time management. What I've actually been doing for 16 years is serving you, cooking your meals exactly how you like them, cleaning the house to your specifications, doing your laundry, including scrubbing stains out of your dirty underwear, organizing my entire life around your comfort and your preferences, while my own needs have become completely irrelevant. I'm done with that, Robert. I'm done being invisible. I'm done existing only to make your life easier." We fought for hours that evening, Robert insisting that I was being unreasonable and abandoning my responsibilities, me holding firm that I was reclaiming myself from years of being erased in service of his comfort. Eventually, Robert stormed out, said he was going to stay at a friend's house until I came to my senses, clearly expecting that time away and the threat of abandonment would make me back down and return to my role as his devoted servant. But his absence felt liberating rather than threatening. With Robert gone, I had space to think about what I actually wanted, space to remember that I was person with needs and desires rather than just function in someone else's life. The next day, I went to an upscale lingerie boutique, the kind of place I'd walked past hundreds of times but had never entered because I'd internalized the message that I didn't deserve nice things, that investing in myself was selfish and wasteful. I spent over $200 on beautiful lingerie, lace bras and matching panties in colors and styles that made me feel attractive and sensual and worthy of investment. Standing in the dressing room trying on this beautiful lingerie, looking at myself in the mirror, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: desire to be seen, recognition of myself as woman with body and sexuality, rather than just as domestic servant. The lingerie wasn't for Robert or for anyone else. It was for me. Reminder that I deserved beautiful things, that my body was worth investing in, that I could choose to prioritize my own pleasure and comfort instead of always prioritizing someone else's. I wore the new lingerie home under my regular clothes, felt the soft, expensive fabric against my skin, felt transformed in ways that went beyond the physical garment. This small act, buying myself beautiful underwear after 16 years of wearing cheap utilitarian basics while washing my husband's dirty boxers, represented fundamental shift in how I saw myself and what I believed I deserved. I wasn't going to be invisible anymore. I wasn't going to accept being erased. I was going to prioritize myself and my needs and my desires. Was going to invest in myself the way I'd been investing in Robert for 16 years. When Robert returned home several days later expecting me to have come to my senses, he found instead that I'd hired divorce attorney and filed separation papers. I told him calmly that our marriage was over, that I wasn't going back to being his domestic servant, that I deserved a partner who valued me as person rather than treating me as appliance that performed necessary functions. Robert tried various approaches: anger, pleading, promises to appreciate me more, threats about financial consequences of divorce. But I remained firm. 16 years of erasure had ended. I was reclaiming myself, and that reclamation started with refusing to continue performing the role of devoted wife who sacrificed everything for husband who gave nothing in return. The divorce process took 14 months to finalize. Robert contested it initially, seemed genuinely unable to understand why I was leaving when, from his perspective, everything had been fine. I'd been performing my wifely duties adequately. He'd been providing financial support. What more could I want? His inability to recognize me as person with needs and desires rather than just as servant who cooked and cleaned revealed exactly why the marriage had been unsustainable. I wasn't leaving because of specific dramatic betrayal. I was leaving because being married to Robert had meant disappearing completely, had meant erasing every aspect of myself that wasn't in service of his comfort. The divorce settlement gave me half our marital assets. Not a huge amount since Robert's income had been modest and we'd lived relatively simply, but enough to provide foundation for rebuilding my life. More valuable than the money was the freedom, the reclamation of myself after 16 years of being invisible. I moved into a small apartment, returned to work as dental hygienist at a practice that welcomed me back despite the long gap in my employment, started rebuilding identity and life that was mine rather than organized entirely around someone else's needs. I continued buying myself beautiful lingerie, not constantly or obsessively, but regularly, as a reminder that I deserved nice things, that my body was worth investing in, that I could prioritize my own pleasure and comfort. The lingerie became symbol of my transformation from erased servant to woman who valued herself, from someone who washed her husband's dirty boxers while wearing cheap utilitarian basics to someone who chose beautiful things for herself because she recognized her own worth. 5 years after that Tuesday afternoon, when I'd dropped Robert's stained boxers back in the washing machine and decided I was done being invisible, I'm 48 and living life that feels genuinely mine. I work 4 days a week as dental hygienist, enjoy my career and my colleagues, value having professional identity that's independent of any relationship. I've dated some, have learned what healthy partnerships look like when both people actually value each other rather than one person serving while the other takes. I've built friendships and hobbies and interests that are about what I enjoy rather than about what someone else needs from me. My apartment is decorated to my taste rather than to someone else's preferences. I cook meals I want to eat at times that work for my schedule rather than organizing my days around someone else's eating patterns. I wear clothes that make me feel attractive and confident rather than clothes chosen to avoid criticism or to meet someone else's standards. And yes, I wear beautiful lingerie regularly, lace and silk in colors I love, garments that make me feel sensual and valuable and worthy of investment. Constant reminder that I choose myself now, that my comfort and my pleasure and my sense of my own worth matter. The transformation from woman who washed her husband's dirty boxers for 16 years to woman who chooses sexy panties for herself wasn't just about underwear. It was about reclaiming identity that had been erased, about recognizing my own worth after years of being treated as invisible servant, about learning to prioritize my needs after decades of sacrificing everything for someone who gave nothing in return. The beautiful lingerie I wear now represents something far more significant than fabric and lace. It represents my choice to value myself, to invest in my own comfort and pleasure, to believe that I deserve beautiful things and that prioritizing myself isn't selfish but necessary. What I learned from 16 years of marriage to Robert and from the laundry incident that catalyzed my transformation is that you can disappear so completely in service of someone else that you forget you're still there, that you still have needs and desires and worth that exists independently of your utility to another person. The moment of recognition, standing with Robert's soiled boxers, understanding that this degrading task was symbol of everything I'd accepted, gave me clarity to start reclaiming myself, to start making choices that prioritized my own needs rather than always sacrificing myself for someone else's comfort. Choosing sexy panties for myself after years of washing my husband's dirty boxers while wearing cheap basics became symbol of larger transformation. From invisible to seen, from servant to person with agency, from someone who existed only to make someone else comfortable to someone who valued her own comfort and pleasure and sense of worth. Every time I put on beautiful lingerie now, I'm reminded that I choose myself, that I'm worth investing in, that my body and my desires and my sense of my own beauty matter independently of whether anyone else notices or appreciates them. The quiet power of self-respect isn't about dramatic gestures or revolutionary acts. It's about small daily choices to value yourself, to prioritize your own needs, to believe you're worthy of investment and care. For me, that power began with dropping my husband's dirty boxers back in the washing machine and deciding I was done, with walking into lingerie boutique and spending money on beautiful things for myself, with recognizing that after 16 years of erasure, I could choose to reclaim myself through small acts that represented fundamental shift in how I valued my own worth. My name is Patricia Hayes. I was married for 16 years to a man who treated me as invisible domestic servant, who expected me to cook his meals and clean his house and wash his dirty underwear while my own needs became completely irrelevant, who saw me as function rather than as person. The moment that catalyzed my transformation came while doing his laundry, holding his stained boxers, suddenly understanding that this degrading task was symbol of everything I needed to stop accepting. I dropped those boxers back in the washing machine unwashed. I walked out of my marriage. And I started choosing beautiful lingerie for myself, not for anyone else's gaze or approval, but as reminder that I deserved to feel attractive and valuable and worthy of investment. What began as simple change in what I wore under my clothes became reclaiming of confidence, desire, identity I'd lost through years of erasure. This is a story about quiet power of self-respect, about learning that choosing yourself, in ways large and small, dramatic and mundane, can be boldest act of all. Thank you for reading. If this story helps you understand that reclaiming yourself begins with the smallest choices, please like and subscribe.